Olivia Chen had mastered the subtle art of being overlooked at Sandstone Flight Academy. At 36, her jet black hair was always tied in the same practical bun she'd worn since flight school, a habit from years when even a single strand could compromise. Helmet seals. Her amber eyes, once described by an instructor as sharp as an eagle's, now carefully avoided meeting the gaze of instructors who saw her as nothing more than a relic. Pilots stubbornly clinging to outdated principles in an pilot stubbornly clinging to outdated principles in an age of digital supremacy. The Flight Simulator Center hummed with morning activity as she arrived at 0530, her worn leather flight jacket contrasting sharply with the sleek uniforms of younger pilots eager to prove themselves on the Academy's newest toys. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The other flight instructors called her analog behind her back, mocking her insistence on teaching manual flight controls and old-school dogfighting techniques in an era when most combat pilots relied heavily on advanced targeting systems and AI-assisted maneuvers. What they didn't know was that Olivia Chen had once been Major Olivia Reynolds, the Air Force's most decorated experimental test pilot, and the only person to have successfully executed the infamous Lazarus Spiral, a near-impossible recovery maneuver that had saved 3 prototype aircraft from certain destruction during her tenure at the Darkwater Testing Range. 9 years ago, she commanded the elite Phantom Squadron, 12 of America's finest pilots flying prototype aircraft. That pushed the boundaries of aerospace engineering. What should have been her crowning achievement became the nightmare that destroyed her career and sent her into professional exile. The sabotage had come from within Dr. Alexander Voss, the program's chief engineer and her mentor. Classified. Technology sold to foreign governments, safety protocols compromised, and 3 pilots dead in catastrophic failures that should never have happened. When the investigations began, falsified maintenance logs and doctored flight data pointed to Olivia as the reckless commander who'd pushed experimental aircraft beyond safe parameters. The inquiry board had been merciless. Major Olivia Reynolds was stripped of her command, her security clearance, and very nearly her pilot's license. Only Admiral James Harrington, her former flight instructor at the Naval Academy, believed her innocence, but his retirement came weeks before he could influence the proceedings. Voss's network of industry connections and military contractors buried the truth beneath terabytes of manufactured evidence. Now, nearly a decade later, Olivia existed on the periphery of the aviation world she once dominated. Every simulator session she supervised, every cadet she instructed, was both punishment and salvation. Close enough to feel the joy of flight, forever barred from the cutting-edge aircraft she once helped develop. She'd legally changed her name, altered her appearance just enough to avoid immediate recognition, and disappeared into the ranks of civilian flight instructors at Sandstone, where her true identity remained hidden from all but the Academy's aging director, who had taken a chance on her mysterious background and undeniable skills. The small apartment she rented in the forgotten section of base housing, once quarters for non-commissioned officers before the facility's transition to a civilian-military hybrid academy, bore little evidence of her former glory. Inside, beneath a simple wooden bed frame, lay a fireproof case containing 3 precious items: her tarnished major's insignia, a photograph of her standing proudly beside the experimental F-39 Wraith fighter, and a handwritten note from Captain Eric Sanderson, one of the pilots who died in the sabotaged aircraft. "Major," the letter read in Eric's precise handwriting, "the Wraith is everything we dreamed of and more. Whatever they throw at us tomorrow, I want you to know the entire squadron believes in your vision. You've created something revolutionary. Here, we're making history together, Sanderson." Every morning at 0430, Olivia ran the Academy perimeter in darkness, her path illuminated only by starlight. The physical exertion helped quiet the ghosts that haunted her 3 lives lost. A revolutionary aircraft program dismantled, and truth buried beneath accusations of negligence and hubris. As she guided cadets through basic flight maneuvers in the Academy's obsolete T-45 simulator, Director Catherine Miller approached with her characteristic blend of professional courtesy and genuine respect. Miller was one of the few people at Sandstone who treated Olivia as a valuable instructor rather than a technological dinosaur, though she had no idea about the depth of expertise hidden behind Olivia's carefully constructed persona. "Chun, something interesting is developing," Miller said, her voice carrying just enough authority to command attention without drawing notice from nearby instructors. "The Centennial Sky Challenge is starting next month at Edwards, and we're required to send an instructor to represent the Academy." Olivia's hands stilled on the simulator controls she'd been adjusting. The Centennial Sky Challenge was the most prestigious military aviation competition in the Western Hemisphere. Elite pilots from every branch of service and allied nations, competing in increasingly difficult flight scenarios designed to showcase both human skill and technological superiority. "Sounds like a job for Captain Rivera or Major Tanner," Olivia replied, keeping her voice carefully neutral despite the sudden acceleration of her pulse. Those instructors taught advanced fighter tactics on the Academy's newest simulator platforms and cultivated close relationships with current military leadership. Miller studied her with unusual intensity. "Ordinarily, yes. But there's a special historical component this year, a tribute to a century of American air power. Each participating organization must also field a pilot in a restored legacy aircraft for the Heritage Exhibition portion." Olivia's heart skipped a beat. Legacy aircraft. After years of teaching simulation only, the prospect of handling actual controls, feeling real G-forces, even in an outdated airframe, sent a surge of longing through her, so intense she had to grip the simulator chair to steady herself. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "The only serviceable aircraft available to us is the old F-5E Tiger II that's been gathering dust in Hangar 7, Miller continued. "The one the Restoration Club has been working on for their museum project. It's airworthy barely, but nobody on current staff has logged meaningful hours in analog-era fighters." "Except me," Olivia said softly, unable to keep the yearning. From her voice, Miller nodded. "You've mentioned your experience with older aircraft several times. This is an exhibition, only no competitive element for the heritage flight, just a demonstration of classic American fighters. 2 weeks TDY at Edwards, all expenses covered by the Centennial Committee." What Miller didn't say, what she couldn't know, was that Edwards Air Force Base was where Alexander Voss now served as Chief of Advanced Weapons Integration, promoted despite the program failures that had destroyed Olivia's career. The universe had a perverse sense of humor, offering her the chance to fly again at the very place her nemesis had built his new empire. "I'll do it," Olivia said, forcing her voice to convey only professional interest rather than the complicated tangle of emotions churning beneath her carefully maintained facade. "Excellent. The restoration team will need your input to finalize the F-5's preparation. It's been decades since that airframe saw active service." Miller handed her a tablet with the official invitation and program details. "One more thing, you'll be sharing hangar space with the current Air Combat Command demonstration teams. Try not to let our antique embarrass us too badly alongside their multi-million-dollar showpieces." As Miller walked away, Olivia scrolled through the participant list, her blood turning to ice when she saw the name. Air Combat Demonstration Lead, Colonel Jason Maxwell, USAF. Maxwell had been a junior officer on her inquiry board, one of the loudest voices calling for her permanent grounding. He wouldn't immediately recognize her with the name change and altered appearance, but close proximity over 2 weeks carried. significant risks of exposure. Later that evening, as Olivia examined the partially restored F-5E Tiger II in Hangar 7, her fingers traced the aircraft's sleek lines with the reverence of someone rediscovering a first love. The Vietnam-era fighter was simple by modern standards: no fly-by-wire controls, no advanced targeting systems, no integrated battle management. Just mechanical linkages, basic avionics, and twin J-85 engines that responded directly to throttle input without computer mediation. "She's not much to look at compared to today's birds," came a voice from behind her. Marcus Wong, head of the Restoration Club and the Academy's chief of maintenance, approached with a clipboard full of inspection records. "But she's honest. No computer deciding what the pilot really meant to do." Olivia nodded, appreciating his understanding of the fundamental difference between modern and legacy aircraft. "How's the restoration coming along?" Director Miller said she's airworthy. "Technically, yes," Marcus agreed with a grimace. "We've got FAA certification, but there's a difference between won't crash immediately and ready for aerobatic display." The following morning brought the first practice session for the aerial demonstrations. Olivia arrived at the hangar before dawn, performing a meticulous pre-flight inspection of the F-5 while the rest of the base slowly came to life. By the time the F-35 team arrived, she was already completing her engine checks. "Somebody's eager to fly the museum piece," Captain Thompson remarked loudly to his colleagues as they sauntered into the hangar. "Better get it done before those engines become actual antiques." Olivia ignored the comment, focusing instead on the aircraft that had become an extension of herself during the intensive restoration process. The F-5 might lack the stealth characteristics, advanced avionics, and network capabilities of modern fighters, but it possessed virtues they could never match: simplicity, responsiveness, and direct mechanical connection between pilot input and aircraft response. When her turn came to practice the heritage demonstration routine, Olivia taxied the Tiger to the runway with a sense of homecoming so powerful it nearly overwhelmed her professional detachment. 9 years since she'd commanded a high-performance military aircraft. 9 years since she'd felt the unique connection between human and machine that defined the fighter pilot's existence. As she lined up for takeoff, she noted several of the demonstration team pilots gathering near the flight line, apparently curious to see if the antiquated fighter could still perform, or perhaps hoping to witness an embarrassing display of obsolescence. Either way, she would give them something to remember. The twin J-85 engines responded instantly to throttle input. None of the hesitation or computer-mediated thrust management of modern fighters. The F-5 accelerated down the runway with a banshee howl that belonged to another era of aviation, lifting off with an eagerness that brought an involuntary smile to Olivia's face. Once airborne, muscle memory took over. Her body remembered what her mind had tried to forget: the perfect harmony between input and response. The fighter responding to pressure so slight it would be imperceptible to observers. She began with the prescribed heritage routine, showcasing the classic lines and capabilities of the Vietnam-era fighter with precision turns, rolls, and climbs that demonstrated its historical significance without pushing its structural limits. But as she completed the final pass of the approved demonstration, something shifted inside her. 9 years of suppressed identity, of hiding her true capabilities, of watching lesser pilots command aircraft she had helped develop, it all crystallized into a single moment of decision. Instead of turning toward the landing pattern, Olivia pushed the Tiger into a vertical climb that would have been impossible without the extensive modifications she and Marcus had implemented. At the apex of the climb, she executed a maneuver that had no official name, a combination of Immelman turn and snap roll that transitioned seamlessly into a diving spiral, pulling out just above the deck in a high-G recovery that squeezed the breath from her lungs. For the next 5 minutes, she put the F-5 through a series of maneuvers that no heritage demonstration had ever included. Maneuvers that showcased not just the aircraft's capabilities, but the skill of the pilot commanding it. Each precision, turn, each perfect energy management decision, each flawless transition between maneuvers sent a clear message to the observers. Below, technology alone doesn't make a fighter pilot. When she finally brought the Tiger back for landing, touching down with textbook precision and taxiing to her assigned spot, Olivia was surprised to find a small crowd had gathered. The expressions ranged from grudging respect to open amazement. That wasn't the approved heritage routine, Maxwell said tersely as she completed shutdown procedures. His expression suggested he was trying to place where he might have seen such flying before. I added some modifications to showcase the aircraft's capabilities more comprehensively, Olivia replied, removing her helmet and avoiding direct eye contact. The Tiger deserves to be remembered as a fighter, not just as a historical curiosity. Before Maxwell could respond, Sarah Martinez pushed through the gathering pilots. That was extraordinary flying, she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. I've never seen anyone handle a legacy aircraft with that level of precision. Captain Thompson, the F-35 pilot who had been most vocal in his derision, studied Olivia with narrowed eyes. Where did you learn to fly like that in an obsolete airframe? Some principles of aviation are timeless, Captain, she replied, securing the cockpit. The laws of physics haven't changed, even if the technology has. As the crowd dispersed, Maxwell lingered, his expression troubled. Your name again? He asked. Chen, Olivia Chen, Sandstone Flight Academy. He nodded slowly. Your flying style reminds me of someone I knew years ago. But that's impossible. He walked away, shaking his head as if dismissing an unwelcome thought. That evening, as Olivia was reviewing maintenance logs in her temporary quarters, there was a knock at the door. Sarah Martinez stood outside, holding a tablet and wearing an expression of barely contained excitement. I knew I recognized those maneuvers, she said without preamble. They're Reynolds' signatures. Olivia froze. I'm not sure what you mean. Sarah stepped inside, closing the door behind her. The vertical transition with lateral displacement, followed by that unique recovery pattern. It's a trademark sequence developed by Major Olivia Reynolds during the Phantom Squadron days. It's studied at Test Pilot School as an example of perfect energy management in experimental aircraft. She placed the tablet on the desk, displaying side-by-side video Olivia's practice flight in the F-5 next to archival footage of an experimental aircraft performing nearly identical maneuvers. The pilot who developed those transitions was grounded after being blamed for 3 fatal crashes, Sarah continued, watching Olivia carefully. But some of us at NASA never believed the official story. The evidence against her was too perfect, too comprehensive. It felt manufactured. Olivia remained silent, years of self-preservation warring with the sudden, unexpected possibility of an ally who had seen through the deception. Your secret is safe with me, Major, Sarah said quietly. But you should know that VOS a CES system is based on the same flawed architecture that caused those crashes 9 years ago. He's covered up the similarity by renaming core components and restructuring the integration framework, but the fundamental instability remains. How do you know this? Olivia finally asked, neither confirming nor denying Sarah's identification. I was a junior engineer on the original program. Too low level to be considered a threat when VOS purged anyone who questioned the official narrative. Sarah's expression hardened. 3 pilots died because critical feedback was suppressed. Now VOS is poised to implement the same flawed system across the entire Air Combat Command, starting with the demonstration team's F-35s at this centennial event. The implications were staggering, not just vindication for Olivia, but prevention of a potentially catastrophic repetition of history. Yet the risk of exposure remained overwhelming. She had rebuilt a life from the ashes of her career. Revealing herself now could destroy everything she'd carefully constructed. What exactly are you suggesting, Dr. Martinez? The ACE's public demonstration is scheduled as the centennial finale. Maxwell will showcase the system's capabilities in a simulated dogfight against Captain Thompson's conventionally piloted F-35. Sarah held Olivia's gaze steadily. But what if there was a last-minute change to the program? What if, instead of a choreographed demonstration between two modern fighters, the ACES system had to prove itself against an older aircraft piloted by someone intimately familiar with its weaknesses? The proposition hung in the air between them, breathtaking in its audacity and terrifying in its potential consequences. Challenge Voss's system publicly, expose its flaws before it could be deployed, and in doing so, risk everything Olivia had rebuilt over 9 painful years. Even if such a scenario were possible, Olivia said carefully, Maxwell would never agree to risk embarrassment by engaging with an obsolete fighter. Sarah's smile was razor-sharp. Leave Maxwell to me. By tomorrow morning, the demonstration parameters will include an unscheduled evaluation of a CES against legacy aircraft to demonstrate cross-generational superiority. Your Tiger against his Lightning, with thousands watching and the Pentagon's acquisition team in attendance. As Sarah departed, Olivia sat motionless, contemplating the crossroads before her. The safe path was clear. Fly her heritage demonstration as scheduled. Avoid drawing further attention and return to the comfortable anonymity of Sandstone Academy. The alternative was to risk everything on a public confrontation with the man who had destroyed her career and endangered countless lives with his ambition. In the darkness of her temporary quarters, she opened her laptop and began methodically reviewing everything she could access about the ACES system. If she was going to challenge Voss's creation, she needed to understand precisely how it would respond to unconventional tactics and exactly where its vulnerabilities might lie. The ghost in the obsolete fighter was about to teach them all what true aerial mastery looked like, and in doing so, perhaps finally exorcise the demons that had haunted her for 9 long years. The morning air crackled with anticipation as Olivia completed her pre-flight inspection of the F-5 Tiger. Word had spread throughout Edwards about the unscheduled addition to the Centennial program, a legacy versus 5th generation demonstration to showcase the autonomous combat enhancement system's adaptability across multiple threat profiles. Colonel Maxwell had announced the change at the morning briefing with poorly disguised irritation, describing it as a last-minute directive from Centennial organizers that he was obligated to accommodate. Captain Thompson had approached her immediately after the briefing, his earlier mockery replaced with calculated assessment. "Don't worry, we'll keep it simple," he said with artificial generosity. "Just try to maintain visual contact with the F-35. I know these older aircraft lack modern sensor packages." Olivia had simply nodded, keeping her expression neutral while mentally cataloging the F-5's advantages: lower wing loading for tighter turn radius, superior visibility from the bubble canopy, and most importantly, no computer-mediated flight. Controls to override pilot inputs in the name of envelope protection. Now, as technicians performed final checks on the demonstration aircraft, Dr. Alexander Voss himself made an appearance in the hangar. At 62, he carried himself with the confident authority of someone accustomed to deference. His silver hair and tailored suit projected the image of a distinguished aerospace innovator, rather than the ruthless opportunist Olivia knew him to be. "So this is our heritage participant," Voss remarked, studying the F-5 without acknowledging Olivia directly. "Quite. It's good for the public to see how far we've advanced." His gaze finally shifted to her, eyes narrowing slightly. "Have we met before, Ms. Chen?" "Olivia Chen," she replied, concentrating on keeping her voice steady as she faced the man who had systematically destroyed her career and caused the deaths of 3 pilots she'd considered family. "I don't believe so, Dr. Voss. I would remember meeting someone of your reputation." He studied her face a moment longer before dismissing whatever fleeting recognition had troubled him. The demonstration parameters have been programmed into Colonel Maxwell's ACES system. Basic engagement protocols, nothing too complex. We wouldn't want to overwhelm older airframes with maneuvers they weren't designed to handle. The condescension in his tone was unmistakable, but Olivia merely smiled. The Tiger may surprise you, Doctor. Sometimes fundamental engineering principles outlast trendy innovations. A flash of annoyance crossed Voss's features before he masked it with a practiced smile. Engineering isn't about nostalgia, Ms. Chen. It's about progress. Today's demonstration will make that abundantly clear. He turned to leave but paused. Try to give our audience a good show before the inevitable conclusion. The contrast makes for better publicity. As Voss departed, Sarah Martinez slipped into the hangar, her expression tense. He's modified the demonstration parameters, she whispered urgently. I've seen the updated mission profile. Maxwell's F-35 is authorized to use the full ACES capability spectrum, including predictive countermeasures that weren't part of the original plan. He's stacking the deck, Olivia replied, unsurprised. Voss never could tolerate even the possibility of failure. Sarah glanced around to ensure they weren't overheard. There's more. I accessed the system architecture through a backdoor in. The test protocols. The core instability issues haven't been resolved. They've been masked by limiting certain operational parameters during controlled demonstrations. But for today's event, those limitations have been removed. The implications were chilling. He's risking structural failure to ensure a decisive victory. Exactly. But only if the aircraft is pushed beyond normal operational stress levels. Sarah's expression hardened. Which means you need to force Maxwell to do exactly that. Olivia understood immediately. The only way to expose the system's flaws would be to place it in precisely the situation. It couldn't handle the same scenario that had led to the deaths of her squadron members years ago. Doing so would require pushing both the F-5 and her own skills to their absolute limits, creating conditions that would force the ACES system to make critical decisions under maximum stress. I'll need to modify my approach, Olivia said, mentally recalculating energy management scenarios. The standard engagement envelope won't reveal the vulnerability. Be careful, Sarah warned. Maxwell is an excellent pilot, even without the system's assistance. And the F-35 has significant advantages in thrust-to-weight ratio and sensor capabilities. But it has weaknesses too, Olivia replied, a tactical plan already forming. Reduced visibility from the cockpit. Airframe limitations in certain maneuver combinations, and most importantly, a pilot who's been taught to trust technology over instinct. As they finalized preparations, the demonstration teams began moving aircraft to the flight line. The Centennial's third day had drawn record crowds, with spectators filling the designated viewing areas and VIPs, occupying a special pavilion near Show Center. Pentagon officials, defense contractors, and military attaches from allied nations had gathered to witness American air power on full display. Olivia taxied the F-5 to the runway threshold, hyper-aware of the stark contrast between her vintage fighter and Maxwell's cutting-edge F-35 waiting behind her. The older aircraft's engine note, a distinctive high-pitched whine rather than the muted roar of modern turbofans, drew attention from spectators accustomed to the sound profiles of newer jets. Tiger 2-1, you are cleared for takeoff, winds calm, the tower controller announced. Maintain heading 270 until reaching demonstration altitude. Tiger 2-1, rolling, Olivia responded, advancing the throttle smoothly. The F-5 accelerated down the runway with an eagerness that belied its age, lifting off into the clear desert sky with a grace that drew appreciative murmurs from aviation enthusiasts in the crowd. Olivia climbed steadily to the designated demonstration altitude of 10,000 feet, performing a perfect aileron roll as she leveled off a Small reminder to observers that the Tiger remained a fully capable aerobatic platform. Lightning lead, you are cleared for takeoff, came the tower's next transmission. Join Tiger 2-1 at demonstration altitude. Maxwell's F-35 thundered down the runway, its advanced propulsion system delivering significantly more thrust than Olivia's twin J-85 engines. The modern fighter caught up quickly, positioning itself 2,000 feet from the F-5 in a classic combat spread formation. This is showtime. All demonstration aircraft are in position, the air boss announced. Over the frequency. You are cleared to commence the Legacy versus 5th generation demonstration. Lightning lead copies, Maxwell responded. Tiger 2-1 will begin with basic engagement maneuvers to demonstrate comparative capabilities. Try to maintain visual contact. The subtle dig wasn't lost on Olivia. Tiger copies. I'll do my best to keep up, Colonel. What followed was supposed to be a carefully choreographed demonstration of technological superiority, the F-35, executing a series of increasingly complex maneuvers, while the older F-5 struggled to maintain position, eventually being defeated by the ACES system's superior predictive capabilities. It would conclude with both aircraft performing a formation pass before the heritage fighter gracefully ceded the spotlight to modern innovation. Voss had scripted a public relations exercise, not a genuine evaluation. Olivia had other plans. As Maxwell initiated the first maneuver, a climbing turn designed to showcase the F-35's superior energy retention, Olivia immediately broke from the expected response pattern. Instead of attempting to match his climb rate, she rolled inverted and pulled through a descending arc that positioned the F-5 perpendicular to the F-35's flight path, achieving a momentary firing solution that would have been lethal in actual combat. Tiger, you've deviated from the demonstration profile. Maxwell's voice carried a note of surprise. Return to formation and follow the established sequence. Olivia ignored the instruction, instead executing a series of jinking maneuvers that deliberately challenged the ACES system's predictive algorithms. The F-5 danced through the air with a responsiveness that computers struggled to anticipate, not because of superior performance, but because Olivia was flying it in ways that defied conventional tactical doctrine. What is she doing? She heard Thompson exclaim on the frequency. That's not in the profile. Maxwell's voice remained controlled but tight. ACES is recalibrating to unconventional maneuver patterns, continuing demonstration with modified parameters. The F-35 accelerated, its superior thrust allowing it to quickly establish an energy advantage. Maxwell used this to execute a textbook ha-yo-yo, an energy-conserving turn designed to bleed off excess speed while maintaining position behind a slower target. It was a maneuver that should have placed him in perfect position to defeat the F-5, but Olivia recognized it instantly and countered with a maneuver that hadn't been taught in decades. A lag displacement roll that exploited the F-35's larger turn radius, allowing the more nimble F-5 to pivot inside Maxwell's arc and reverse the pursuit geometry. Suddenly, the heritage fighter was on the offensive, forcing the modern jet to defend. Lightning lead, ACES is recommending evasive action. Sequence Delta, came the voice of the ground controller monitoring the system's performance. Target aircraft is demonstrating unexpected capability. Maxwell's response was clipped. Executing Delta sequence. The F-35 abruptly changed its flight profile, engaging afterburner and climbing vertically before rolling into a diving turn. Classic energy trading maneuver that leveraged the modern fighter's superior thrust. It should have re-established dominance decisively. Olivia anticipated this exact response. 9 years earlier, she had identified the critical flaw in Voss's system, its tendency to default to energy-intensive solutions that placed extreme stress on airframe components during rapid transitions. The same flaw that had caused structural failures in the experimental aircraft her pilots had been flying. As Maxwell's F-35 dove toward her position, she executed the maneuver she had been planning since learning of the demonstration, a modified Cobra that transitioned into a flat spin before recovering with a snap roll that placed her directly in Maxwell's blind spot. It was a combination that no algorithm could predict because it deliberately sacrificed energy in a way that violated conventional aerial tactics. "I've lost visual." Maxwell's voice held the first hint of genuine concern. "ACES is not providing target location." "Target has entered your 6 o'clock low position," the ground controller reported urgently. "ACE is recalculating intercept solutions." The crowd below had fallen silent, aviation experts among them recognizing that they were witnessing something unprecedented, a decades-old fighter outmaneuvering one of the world's most advanced combat aircraft through pure pilot skill. In the VIP pavilion, Dr. Voss stood rigid with growing alarm. This was not the technology demonstration he had carefully orchestrated. The obsolete fighter was exposing limitations in his system before the very officials whose approval he needed. For full deployment, override standard protocols, he ordered the ACES ground controller. "Activate contingency module 7. The technician hesitated. "Sir, that module hasn't completed validation testing." "It could activate it now." Voss snapped. "We're not losing this demonstration to a museum piece." Back in the air, Olivia maintained her tactical advantage, forcing Maxwell to defend against maneuvers that shouldn't have been possible in an aircraft of the F-5's generation. Each time the F-35 attempted to use its superior technology to regain the upper hand, she countered with flying that relied on fundamental principles rather than advanced systems. "Lightning lead, contingency module 7 has been activated," the ground controller announced. "ACES is now operating with expanded parameters. You have full system authority." Maxwell's voice revealed both surprise and relief. "Copy that." Engaging enhanced capabilities. The F-35's behavior changed dramatically. Its movements became more aggressive, transitioning between maneuvers with a precision that pushed structural limits. The ACES system, freed from standard safety constraints, was now executing tactics optimized purely for victory with reduced concern for airframe limitations. This was exactly what Olivia had been waiting for. The next phase would be dangerous deliberately, luring the F-35 into a series of high-stress maneuvers that would force the ACES system to make the same critical errors that had proven fatal years earlier. Tiger 2-1, this demonstration has exceeded authorized parameters, the air boss intervened. Both aircraft return to level flight and prepare for the conclusion sequence. Olivia ignored the instruction, instead executing a split S that dropped the F-5 2,000 feet and reversed direction. The maneuver was perfectly calculated to appear as retreat while actually baiting pursuit. The ACES system took the bait. Maxwell's F-35 followed, its superior thrust allowing it to close distance rapidly. The modern fighter's trajectory was optimized by algorithms that prioritized intercept solutions over structural loading. Considerations, exactly the scenario that had led to catastrophic failures in the experimental program. Lightning lead, ACES is showing stress warnings in the primary control surfaces. The ground controller reported with increasing urgency. Recommend disengaging enhanced capabilities. Negative, Kim Voss's voice, overriding normal protocols. By speaking directly on the tactical frequency, the system is operating within expanded tolerances. Continue the intercept. As the F-35 closed on her position, Olivia executed the final phase of her plan, a complex sequence of opposing control inputs that no modern flight computer would allow, but that the F-5's mechanical controls permitted. The Tiger seemed to dance through impossible geometry, changing direction multiple times within seconds while maintaining structural integrity through precise energy management. The ACES system, attempting to predict and counter these movements, commanded increasingly extreme responses from the F-35. Maxwell, trusting the technology implicitly, followed the system's guidance despite growing vibrations that indicated dangerous structural loading. "Lightning lead, you're exceeding safe operational limits," the air boss warned. "Disengage ACES immediately." But it was too late. As the F-35 executed a high-G transition from vertical to horizontal flight, a maneuver the ACES system calculated would establish a terminal firing solution. A distinctive metallic groan echoed through Maxwell's cockpit. Warning indicators flashed across his displays as the fighter's flight control surfaces experienced momentary asymmetric loading. "I've got uncommanded roll," Maxwell reported, his voice tight with controlled panic. "ACES is sending conflicting inputs to the control surfaces." The F-35 shuddered visibly, rolling inverted before Maxwell could override the system and regain manual control. The fighter dropped 3,000 feet before stabilizing, its advanced flight control system desperately compensating for the momentary failure. "All aircraft terminate demonstration immediately," the air boss ordered. "Lightning lead status report." "Aircraft is responding to manual control," Maxwell reported, his voice strained. "Multiple system warnings. Requesting priority." Landing. Olivia brought the F-5 into a gentle orbit above the airfield, watching as the F-35 made an emergency approach, its movements now cautious and deliberate. The demonstration had ended in the most dramatic way possible, not with the heritage fighters' graceful concession to superior technology, but with the modern marvel limping back to Earth after being outflown by a pilot in an aircraft 40 years its senior. As Maxwell taxied the compromised F-35 to its designated spot, emergency vehicles positioned nearby as a precaution, Olivia completed a perfect three-point landing in the F-5. The Tiger had performed flawlessly throughout the entire engagement, its simple, robust systems proving more reliable under stress than the integrated technology of its advanced counterpart. The crowd's reaction was unprecedented for a technical demonstration. Spontaneous applause erupted as Olivia taxied past the viewing areas, aviation enthusiasts recognizing that they had witnessed something extraordinary, a masterclass in pure flying skill triumphing over technological superiority. In the VIP pavilion, Pentagon officials were engaged in intense conversation, several of them gesturing toward Dr. Vos, whose expression had transformed from confidence to barely concealed fury. The ACES system, meant to showcase American technological dominance, had instead demonstrated dangerous vulnerabilities when confronted with unconventional tactics. As Olivia completed shutdown procedures, Sarah Martinez approached the F-5, her expression a mixture of awe and vindication. "You did it," she said quietly. "Every sensor reading, every system response, it all matches the failure pattern from 9 years ago. The data is conclusive." Colonel Maxwell arrived moments later, his face ashen as technicians swarmed around. His F-35, downloading diagnostic information and inspecting control surfaces for damage. He approached Olivia with the stunned expression of someone whose fundamental beliefs had been shaken. "That flying," he said, struggling to find adequate words. "I've only seen one pilot who could." His voice trailed off as recognition finally dawned. 9 years of separation and a different name no longer sufficient disguise against the unmistakable flying style he had just witnessed. "Reynolds? Major Olivia Reynolds?" Olivia removed her helmet completely, meeting his gaze directly for the first time. "Hello, Jason. It's been a while." Maxwell's expression cycled through shock, confusion, and finally dawning comprehension. "The inquiry board, the evidence against you. It was manufactured, wasn't it? Every bit of it," Olivia confirmed. "Voss needed a scapegoat when his system caused those crashes. I was convenient vocal in my objections, isolated enough to be vulnerable." Before Maxwell could respond, military security personnel approached rapidly, led by a grim-faced general wearing the insignia of the Air Force Materiel Command. "Colonel Maxwell, we need immediate access to all the CES operational data," the general ordered by direct authority of the Joint Chiefs. Maxwell stepped aside, still processing the implications of Olivia's revelation. "General Carson, this is Major Olivia Reynolds," the general finished, surprising them both. "Yes, I know. Dr. Martinez has been keeping certain people informed about your situation for several years. Major, we've been waiting for the right opportunity to re-examine your case." Olivia turned to Sarah in shock. The NASA test pilot smiled sadly. "After I recognized your flying yesterday, I made some calls to people who never believed the official story. People who've been watching Voss for years, gathering evidence but lacking the final proof. His system was fundamentally flawed. Today's demonstration provided that proof," General Carson continued. "The telemetry data shows exactly the same failure pattern that occurred in the experimental aircraft 9 years ago. Voss is being detained pending investigation into falsification of safety data and obstruction of justice." The reality of what was happening struck Olivia with physical force. After 9 years of exile, of rebuilding a life from ashes, vindication had come in the most public way possible, not through bureaucratic channels or legal proceedings, but through pure flying skill that no one could deny. "There will be a formal reinvestigation," Carson explained. "Your record will be cleared, your rank restored. The Air Force owes you that much, at minimum." As security personnel escorted a protesting Voss from the VIP pavilion, Captain Thompson approached hesitantly, his earlier arrogance replaced by genuine respect. "Man, I've never seen flying like that. Everything they teach us about technology making skill obsolete." He shook his head. "They're wrong. Technology enhances skill, Captain," Olivia replied. "It doesn't replace it. The most sophisticated computer can't substitute for understanding an aircraft's soul, the way it wants to move through air, the harmony between human intention and mechanical response." General Carson cleared his throat. "Major Reynolds, when this is resolved, the Air Force would welcome you back. Test Pilot School is looking for an instructor who can teach the fundamentals that seem to be getting lost in this era of digital dependence." The offer represented everything Olivia had lost: restoration of rank, reputation, the chance to fly cutting-edge aircraft again. Yet something had changed during her years at Sandstone. She had discovered a different purpose in teaching fundamentals to new generations, ensuring that core skills weren't sacrificed on the altar of technological advancement. As the implications of the day's events continued to unfold around her, Olivia gazed at the F-5 that had just accomplished the impossible. The aging fighter stood proud among its modern counterparts, a reminder that fundamental principles endure even as technology evolves. Like its pilot, it had been underestimated, dismissed as obsolete, and like her, it had proven that true mastery transcends the limitations others impose. The ghost in the obsolete fighter had done more than expose a dangerous flaw in modern systems. She had reminded the aviation world of an essential truth that no algorithm could compute. The human element remained the most critical component in the complex dance between earth and sky. The aftermath of the aerial confrontation spread through Edwards Air Force Base like wildfire. Within hours, video of the engagement had been viewed by thousands of military personnel, shared through unofficial channels despite security protocols. By evening, classified briefings were being conducted at the Pentagon as officials grappled with the implications of what had occurred in the clear desert sky. Olivia found herself in a strange limbo, not yet officially reinstated, but no longer hiding. She had been assigned temporary quarters in the visiting officers section while investigators assembled the facts surrounding both the original case against her and the current ACES system failure. The small room became command central for what was rapidly evolving into a full-scale investigation of scientific fraud and criminal negligence. The technical analysis is irrefutable, Sarah explained, spreading documents across the small desk. The same algorithmic flaw that caused the experimental aircraft crashes 9 years ago is present in the current ACES architecture. Voss simply buried it deeper in the code and added compensatory subroutines to mask the symptoms during standard testing. General Carson nodded grimly, and bypassed proper validation protocols through political connections. 3 defense secretaries have cycled through the Pentagon since the original incidents, each one assured that previous concerns had been addressed. What happens now? Olivia asked, still processing the whirlwind of events that had transformed her from disgraced exile to key witness in less than 24 hours. The formal investigation will take months, Carson admitted. But certain actions are already in motion. The ACES program has been suspended pending complete code review. Voss is being questioned about falsification of safety data. And as for you, he produced an official-looking envelope. These are preliminary orders reinstating you to active duty status while the investigation proceeds. Olivia accepted the envelope with mixed emotions. For 9 years, she had dreamed of vindication, of having her name cleared and her service record restored. Yet the document represented more than personal redemption. It symbolized a systematic failure of the institution she had once trusted implicitly. "There's something else you should see," Sarah added, pulling up a secure browser on her tablet. The Centennial organizers live-streamed all the demonstrations. "Your engagement with Maxwell has gone viral in aviation circles." The video showed multiple angles of the aerial confrontation, including cockpit feeds from both aircraft. The contrast was stark. Maxwell repeatedly consulting complex displays, while Olivia flew with an almost balletic focus. Her movements, economical and precise as she guided the F-5 through maneuvers that defied conventional tactical doctrine. 2 million views in 6 hours, Sarah noted. And the comments are fascinating. Current military pilots are stunned. Civilians are inspired. You've started something much bigger than just exposing Voss's fraud. Before Olivia could respond, there was a knock at the door. Colonel Maxwell stood outside, his expression a complex mixture of professional embarrassment and personal reckoning. "Major Reynolds," he said formally, "may I have a word?" Alone in the small quarters, the 2 pilots regarded each other across 9 years of separation. Maxwell had aged well, his features hardened by command responsibility, but still recognizable as the ambitious young officer who had once condemned her on insufficient evidence. "I owe you an apology," he began, the words clearly difficult for a man accustomed to certainty. 9 years ago, I believed what the evidence showed, what I was told it showed. I never questioned whether that evidence might have been manipulated." Olivia studied him carefully. "Would it have made a difference if you had questioned it?" "Voss had powerful allies, and I had none." "I'd like to think it would have," Maxwell replied, though his tone suggested he recognized the hollowness of hindsight. The inquiry board was politically complex. Several members expressed reservations privately, but were overruled. "Including you?" Maxwell had the grace to look uncomfortable. "No, I believed Voss's technical analysis. I thought you had pushed experimental aircraft beyond safe parameters out of arrogance or misplaced confidence." He met her gaze directly. "Today you humbled me in the most comprehensive way possible. Not just by outflying me, but by demonstrating integrity I lacked 9 years ago." The admission surprised her, not the acknowledgement of her superior flying, which was objectively demonstrable, but the recognition of a moral failure that most career officers would have rationalized away. "The system is already being dismantled," Maxwell continued. "General Carson has ordered complete removal of a CES from all test aircraft pending the investigation. But there's something else we need to discuss." He hesitated. "Your reinstatement." What about it? It's going to be complicated. Bureaucratically and politically. There are people who were involved in your case who now occupy very senior positions. They won't welcome evidence of their complicity or poor judgment. Olivia had anticipated this. You think they'll try to limit the scope of the reinvestigation? I think they'll attempt to frame it as a new technical discovery that couldn't have been known 9 years ago. Maxwell's tone was matter-of-fact. They'll acknowledge you were wronged, but avoid assigning specific blame. You'll get restoration of rank, back pay, possibly even a promotion as compensation. But full accountability? That's unlikely. The assessment was realistic if cynical. Large institutions rarely admitted fundamental failures of judgment, preferring to characterize mistakes as unavoidable outcomes of incomplete information rather than moral or professional lapses. What do you suggest? Olivia asked, curious about his perspective. That depends on what you want, Major. Maxwell studied her with new respect. Restoration of your military career? Public vindication? Or something else entirely? The question struck deeper than Maxwell could know. During her years at Sandstone, Olivia had constructed a life defined by different values than those that had driven her military career. Teaching fundamentals to new pilots, emphasizing the human element. In an increasingly automated domain, there was purpose in that work that transcended rank or professional status. I need to think about it, she replied honestly. Maxwell nodded. Take the time you need. But be aware that others are already making decisions that will affect your options. He rose to leave but paused at the door. For what it's worth, Reynolds, you're the finest pilot I've ever encountered. Whatever path you choose, don't let them diminish what you accomplished today. After he departed, Olivia sat quietly, contemplating the crossroads before her. The military would offer reinstatement on their terms, rehabilitation without full accountability, restoration without genuine reckoning. She would regain her wings, but at the cost of tacitly accepting a narrative that protected the institution. At the expense of truth. Her reflection was interrupted by another knock. This time, Director Miller from Sandstone Academy stood outside, her expression a mixture of amazement and wry understanding. I suspected you were more than you appeared, Miller said without preamble. But a disgraced test pilot who just publicly humiliated the Air Force's most advanced combat system? That exceeds even my imagination. Despite everything, Olivia found herself smiling. In my defense, I never claimed to be just a flight instructor. No, you simply demonstrated more knowledge about aircraft systems than engineers with doctoral degrees while pretending to be an ordinary civilian pilot. Miller's tone was dry but not unkind. The Academy's trustees are in a panic. Half of them fear military reprisals for harboring you. The other half want to build a marketing campaign around your connection to Sandstone. I never intended to cause problems for the Academy, Olivia said, genuine regret coloring her voice. The institution had provided sanctuary when she needed it most. Miller waved away the concern. Problems? You've just made Sandstone the most talked about flight academy in the country. Applications will double after this publicity. Her expression grew more serious. But that's not why I'm here. The Academy trustees have authorized me to offer you something. What kind of something? A permanent position. Full tenure. Academic rank of Professor of Aviation Science, with a mandate to develop a comprehensive curriculum rebuilding the connections between fundamental flight principles and advanced systems integration. The offer was unexpected but intriguing. The military is likely to offer reinstatement, Olivia noted. Of course they are, Miller agreed. They'd be fools not to. But consider what that reinstatement will mean in practical terms. You'll be a symbol, carefully managed and controlled. Your expertise will be acknowledged but contained within parameters that don't threaten existing power structures. The assessment matched Maxwell's warning with uncomfortable precision. And at Sandstone? At Sandstone, you would build something new. Not just a curriculum, but a philosophy of aviation that honors technological advancement without sacrificing core principles. Miller's eyes lit with genuine passion. What you demonstrated today wasn't just superior flying skill, it was a fundamental truth about the relationship between human judgment and technological capability that's being lost in modern training regimes. As Miller outlined her vision, Olivia found herself drawn to the possibilities. The Academy could become a center for a new approach to aviation training, one that integrated cutting-edge technology with timeless principles, where pilots learned not just to operate advanced systems, but to understand the fundamental physics and human factors that made flight possible. Think about it, Miller urged as she prepared to leave. The military will offer you restoration of what was taken. We're offering you the chance to build something that never existed before. After Miller's departure, Olivia sought solitude to process the diverging paths before her. She found it in the hangar where the F-5 waited, its simple lines a stark contrast to the fifth-generation fighters surrounding it. The aging airframe had proven more than a match for advanced technology when paired with a pilot who understood its capabilities at the deepest level. As she ran her hand along the Tiger's fuselage, Sarah Martinez entered the hangar, accompanied by two pilots wearing NASA flight suits. Major Reynolds, said the older of the two, a silver-haired woman whose bearing suggested decades of aviation experience. I'm Dr. Eleanor Wright, Director of NASA's Experimental Flight Test Division. This is Commander James Takahashi, our lead test pilot. We've been following your situation with great interest, Wright continued. Dr. Martinez has kept us informed about both your history and your current circumstances. Olivia glanced at Sarah, who offered an apologetic smile. NASA has maintained an independent assessment of the original experimental aircraft program, she explained. Dr. Wright was suspicious of the findings against you from the beginning. More than suspicious, Wright corrected. Openly skeptical. But without access to the original code or a demonstration of the failure mode, we couldn't prove malfeasance. She regarded Olivia with undisguised admiration. Until you forced the issue in the most dramatic way possible. Commander Takahashi stepped forward. What you did today wasn't just extraordinary flying, Major. It was engineering brilliance. You deliberately induced a system failure that engineers have been trying to isolate for years. NASA would like to offer you a position, Wright stated directly. We're developing next-generation aerospace platforms that bridge conventional flight and orbital operations. We need test pilots who understand both the mathematics and the intuitive dimensions of experimental flight. The offer was compelling in ways the military reinstatement couldn't match. NASA operated with greater independence from the political forces that had enabled Voss's deception. It represented the possibility of working at the genuine cutting edge of aerospace development without the constraints of military hierarchy. You wouldn't just be flying experimental aircraft, Takahashi added. You'd be helping design them, ensuring that human factors aren't sacrificed to theoretical performance metrics. By evening, Olivia had received 3 distinct offers representing 3 different futures: military reinstatement that would restore what was taken, an academic position that would allow her to reshape aviation training, and a NASA role that would place her at the frontier of aerospace development. Each path offered unique possibilities and particular constraints. The military would provide vindication but limited autonomy. Sandstone would offer independence but reduced access to cutting-edge technology. NASA represented the technical frontier but would require relocating away from the community she'd built over 9 years. As she weighed these options, a fourth possibility began to crystallize, one that drew elements from each offer, but transcended their limitations. A path that would require courage and vision, but might address the fundamental issues that had allowed Voss's deception to persist. The following morning, the Centennial Air Show's final day brought record crowds. News of the dramatic confrontation between the obsolete fighter and the advanced F-35 had spread beyond aviation circles, drawing public attention to what had been planned as a relatively technical demonstration. Pentagon officials, sensing a potential public relations challenge, had authorized a special presentation to contextualize the previous day's events. General Carson approached Olivia as she prepared for what would be her final flight in the F-5. Before it returned to Sandstone, the Joint Chiefs have approved an unprecedented statement acknowledging the original error and your complete exoneration, he informed her. It will be announced publicly today, with formal reinstatement to follow. And the accountability for those who enabled Voss's fraud? Olivia asked, already knowing the answer. Carson's expression confirmed her suspicion. The official position is that technical limitations at the time prevented full understanding of the system architecture. Essentially, that nobody could have known with certainty what Voss was concealing. It was the response Maxwell had predicted: institutional self-protection disguised as technical nuance. The injustice would be acknowledged and remedied, but the structural failures that enabled it would remain unaddressed. I've been authorized to offer you promotion to Lieutenant Colonel with immediate effect, Carson continued, with assignment to any command you choose within Air Force Materiel Command. Olivia nodded thoughtfully. And if I were to propose an alternative arrangement? Carson raised an eyebrow. What kind of arrangement? Something that doesn't yet exist, Olivia replied, but perhaps should. As the air show's final day proceeded, anticipation built for this special presentation. Announced in the program, spectators who had witnessed or heard about the previous day's dramatic aerial confrontation returned in greater numbers, curious about the military's official response to what many were characterizing as a David versus Goliath victory. The F-5 took center stage for the presentation, positioned prominently on the flight line with honor guards stationed at its wings. Military officials, NASA representatives, and civilian aviation authorities gathered in the VIP section, their presence indicating the significance of what was about to occur. General Carson approached the microphone, his expression solemn as he addressed the crowd. Ladies and gentlemen, yesterday you witnessed something extraordinary, a demonstration that fundamental aviation principles and exceptional pilot skill remain relevant even in an age of advanced technology. Today, we're here to recognize not just that achievement, but to correct a historical injustice. He proceeded to outline the facts of Olivia's case: her distinguished service, the experimental aircraft program, the falsified evidence that led to her unjust removal from service. The crowd listened in stunned silence as the tale of betrayal and eventual vindication unfolded. Major Olivia Reynolds exemplifies the highest traditions of American aviation, Carson concluded. Today, we not only restore her rightful place in our ranks, but announce a new initiative inspired by the lessons of her experience. At his gesture, Olivia stepped forward in a newly issued dress uniform, bearing the insignia of Lieutenant Colonel. The restoration of her military identity, visible in the precision of her appearance and the quiet dignity of her bearing, drew spontaneous applause from military personnel in the audience who recognized the significance of the moment. "Thank you, General," she said, taking the microphone. 9 years ago, I lost more than a career when false evidence ended my service. I lost faith in a system I had dedicated my life to upholding. Yesterday's demonstration wasn't just about vindicating my own case, it was about highlighting a dangerous imbalance in how we approach aviation technology. Her gaze swept the audience, connecting with pilots, engineers, and officials who represented every facet of the aerospace community. We've created a culture that prioritizes technological solutions over human judgment, that values system complexity over fundamental understanding. This imbalance doesn't just threaten individual careers, it endangers lives and compromises our national security. The crowd's attention was absolute, senior officials leaning forward as Olivia articulated concerns that many had felt but few had voiced publicly. The incident that ended my career wasn't just one man's fraud. It was enabled by institutional structures that discouraged questioning, that prioritized program timelines over safety protocols, that treated experienced pilots as interchangeable system operators rather than essential partners in aerospace development. General Carson returned to the microphone. Which is why, effective immediately, the Department of Defense is establishing the Integrated Aviation Advancement Center, a joint initiative between the Air Force, Navy, NASA, and civilian aviation. Authorities dedicated to ensuring balance between technological innovation and foundational flight principles. A murmur of surprise rippled through the audience as Carson continued. Lieutenant Colonel Reynolds will serve as the center's inaugural director, with a mandate to develop programs that bridge the gap between advanced systems development and practical aviation expertise. The announcement represented something unprecedented, an official acknowledgement that the problems exposed by Olivia's case extended beyond individual misconduct to fundamental institutional shortcomings. The new center would have authority to review aviation technology programs across multiple agencies, ensuring that human factors and core flight principles weren't sacrificed in the pursuit of technological advancement. This position will incorporate elements from all service branches, NASA's Experimental Flight Division, and civilian aviation authorities, Carson explained. It will be headquartered at Edwards, but maintain satellite operations at key aerospace facilities nationwide, including a dedicated training component at Sandstone Academy. The structure elegantly incorporated aspects from each offer Olivia had received: military authority without conventional hierarchy constraints, educational components that would reshape training philosophies, and direct involvement in cutting-edge aerospace development. More importantly, it created a platform from which to address the systemic issues that had enabled Voss's deception. We're not just correcting a past injustice, Olivia concluded, addressing the audience directly. We're creating safeguards to prevent similar failures in the future. The lesson of yesterday's demonstration isn't that older aircraft can sometimes outperform newer ones under specific conditions. It's that the ultimate determinant of aviation excellence isn't the sophistication of our technology but the wisdom with which we integrate it with human capability. As she completed her address, the crowd rose in standing ovation, not just for the personal vindication they were witnessing, but for the institutional courage represented by such a dramatic course correction. Military officers, civilian engineers, and aviation enthusiasts alike recognized the significance of what was being established. Later, as officials gathered to discuss implementation details, Colonel Maxwell approached Olivia with newfound respect. "You could have simply accepted reinstatement and a comfortable position," he observed. "Instead, you've created something that will challenge every assumption about how we develop aviation technology. The alternative was to watch the same mistakes repeated with different technology," Olivia replied. 9 years gave me perspective I wouldn't have had otherwise. Sometimes you need distance from a system to see its flaws clearly. Sarah Martinez joined them, her expression one of quiet satisfaction. "The NASA contingent is already discussing collaborative projects. Dr. Wright is practically giddy about the possibilities for integrating human factors research into early-stage development." As they spoke, Olivia's gaze returned to the F-5. That had made everything possible. The aging fighter stood proud on the flight line, its simple elegance a reminder that fundamental principles endure even as technology evolves. Like its pilot, it had been dismissed as obsolete, relegated to history rather than recognized for the timeless qualities it embodied. "What happens to the Tiger now?" Maxwell asked, following her gaze. "It returns to Sandstone," Olivia replied. "But not as a museum piece. as a teaching platform for the fundamentals that apply regardless of technological generation. Director Miller, overhearing as she approached, smiled appreciatively. "We'll establish it as the flagship of a new heritage skills program where students learn to fly without electronic assistance before transitioning to advanced systems." "Exactly," Olivia agreed. "Not out of nostalgia, but because understanding fundamental principles makes pilots better at utilizing advanced technology. The pilots who learn in that tiger will have a foundation that no simulator can provide." As the group discussed implementation details for the various components of the new center, Olivia found herself experiencing something she hadn't felt in 9 years: the sense of building rather than rebuilding, of creating future possibilities rather than reclaiming past achievements. The vindication was satisfying, but the opportunity to transform aerospace development represented something far more significant. The ghost in the obsolete fighter had done more than expose a dangerous flaw in modern systems or reclaim a stolen career. She had created a new framework for integrating human expertise with technological advancement, a legacy that would influence aviation development long after the details of her personal story faded from memory. As the desert sun began its descent toward the horizon, casting long shadows across Edward's historic runways, Olivia contemplated the journey that had brought her to this moment. 9 years of exile had taught her that identity couldn't be defined by rank or position, that expertise transcended official recognition, and that sometimes the most valuable perspective came from outside conventional power structures. The obsolete fighter that everyone had laughed at had proven that fundamental principles, skillfully applied, could overcome even the most sophisticated technology. Its pilot had demonstrated that true expertise wasn't measured by the systems you commanded, but by your understanding of the underlying principles that made those systems possible. Together, they had changed not just one pilot's future, but the future of aviation itself. The Integrated Aviation Advancement Center took shape with remarkable speed over the following months, transforming from concept to reality through the combined efforts of military leaders, NASA officials, and civilian aviation authorities. What began as a response to a specific injustice evolved into something far more significant, a fundamental reimagining of how human expertise and technological advancement could coexist in modern aerospace development. 6 months after the dramatic centennial confrontation, Olivia stood in the center's newly completed headquarters at Edwards Air Force Base. The facility embodied her vision of integration: glass walls separating different departments, but allowing visibility across disciplines. Collaborative spaces where pilots and engineers worked side by side, and hangars where cutting-edge aircraft shared space with carefully restored heritage planes. Lieutenant Colonel Reynolds, the first candidate cohort has arrived. Captain Eliza Takamoto, Olivia's executive officer and a former Navy test pilot, stood in the doorway with the quiet efficiency that had made her invaluable during the center's establishment. After the centennial incident, applications had flooded in from military and civilian personnel eager to be part of the new initiative. The selection process had been rigorous, prioritizing not just technical expertise, but the capacity to bridge traditional boundaries between disciplines. "Thank you, Captain. I'll be right there." As Olivia gathered her materials for the orientation address, she reflected on the extraordinary changes the past 6 months had brought. The formal investigation into Vosa's fraud had expanded beyond the ACES system to encompass multiple programs, revealing a pattern of data manipulation that spanned more than a decade. 3 senior officials had resigned rather than face disciplinary action, and congressional oversight committees were conducting comprehensive reviews of military acquisition processes. More personally, Olivia had received formal apologies from each member of the original inquiry board, including several who admitted they had harbored doubts but lacked the courage to challenge the prevailing narrative. Maxwell, to his credit, had been unflinching in acknowledging his failure of judgment, subsequently becoming one of the center's strongest advocates within traditional military circles. The first cohort of 50 participants waiting in the orientation hall represented a cross-section of the aerospace community: military test pilots, civilian engineers, NASA researchers, and even 2 commercial airline captains, whose unconventional problem-solving had caught the selection committee's attention. They fell silent as Olivia entered, many straightening unconsciously in the presence of the woman whose dramatic vindication had captivated the aviation world. "Welcome to the Integrated Aviation Advancement Center," she began, her voice carrying easily through the space. "You've been selected not just for your technical expertise or flying skills, but for your demonstrated ability to think beyond conventional parameters. That capacity will be essential for what we're building here." She activated the presentation screen, displaying not complex organizational charts or technical specifications, but a simple image of the F-5 Tiger II that had changed everything. "This aircraft represents more than a nostalgic connection to aviation history," Olivia continued. "It embodies principles that remain valid regardless of technological generation, principles that were nearly forgotten in our rush to embrace digital solutions for analog problems." For the next hour, she outlined the center's mission and methodology, emphasizing the integration of human expertise with technological advancement rather than the subordination of one to the other. The program would incorporate elements that seemed contradictory in traditional frameworks: cutting-edge simulation alongside basic stick and rudder training, advanced systems development paired with fundamental aerodynamics, artificial intelligence, algorithms informed by the intuitive knowledge of experienced pilots. "You'll begin your journey here by flying this," she said, gesturing toward the image of the F-5. "Not because we expect you to encounter 40-year-old fighters in operational contexts, but because mastering an aircraft without digital assistance develops capabilities that transfer across all platforms. Understanding what happens when an aircraft approaches stall without flight envelope protection means you'll make better decisions when advanced systems are available." The approach represented a dramatic departure from conventional military and civilian training philosophies, which increasingly emphasize systems management over fundamental flying skills. It acknowledged that while technology had transformed aviation, the underlying physics remained unchanged, and human understanding of those fundamentals remained crucial even in highly automated environments. As the formal presentation concluded, and participants moved to tour the facility, Dr. Eleanor Wright of NASA approached Olivia with evident satisfaction. "You've created something remarkable here," the older woman observed. "In 6 months, you've shifted the conversation across the entire aerospace community. Programs that were rushing toward full automation are now reincorporating human oversight elements. Training regimes that emphasize systems management are reintroducing fundamental aerodynamics." Olivia nodded, recognizing the broader impact, while remaining focused on the challenges ahead. "We're making progress, but institutional momentum is powerful. There are still those who see human judgment as an impediment to technological advancement rather than its essential complement. Which is why what happens here over the next year will be crucial," Wright agreed. "The results your first cohort produces will either validate this approach or provide ammunition to those who prefer the status quo." The observation was accurate if sobering. Despite the dramatic vindication at the centennial, Olivia recognized that the center's existence remained politically vulnerable. Defense contractors invested in fully autonomous systems viewed the emphasis on human expertise as a threat to CUFA, lucrative development programs. Military traditionalists considered the interdisciplinary approach a dilution of service-specific doctrine. Each would eagerly exploit any shortcoming to argue for returning to conventional paradigms. The stakes became clearer that evening when General Carson called an unexpected meeting with the center's leadership team. His expression was grave as he addressed the small group gathered in Olivia's office. The Senate Armed Services Committee has scheduled oversight hearings on the center's establishment and funding, he announced without preamble. Senator Harrison has expressed concerns about resource allocation and duplication of existing capabilities. The news was unwelcome, but not surprising. Senator Richard Harrison chaired the powerful Defense Appropriations Subcommittee and maintained close relationships with several major defense contractors, including those who had championed Voss's approach to systems development. Timeline? Olivia asked, already calculating implications. 6 weeks. They're requesting comprehensive performance metrics, cost-benefit analyses, and specific examples of capabilities this center provides that aren't available through existing channels. Captain Takamoto's expression darkened. 6 weeks is barely enough time to complete the first phase of the integration curriculum, let alone generate meaningful metrics. That's likely by design, Dr. Wright noted dryly. Set an impossible standard, then cite failure to meet it as justification for returning to conventional approaches. Olivia absorbed the challenge with the calm focus that had become her trademark. Then we accelerate the timeline. The broken arrow exercise was scheduled for month 3. We move it to week 5. It's ambitious but achievable if we intensify the preparation sequence. The suggestion drew concerned looks from her team. Broken Arrow was a complex scenario designed to validate the center's integrated approach, a simulated crisis requiring pilots and engineers to collaborate in developing solutions to cascading systems failures in next-generation aircraft. Moving it forward by 7 weeks would place enormous pressure on both staff and participants. The cohort isn't ready for that level of complexity, Commander Takahashi objected. We designed the curriculum as a progressive build fundamental skills providing the foundation for advanced applications. Jumping ahead risks failure at a critical moment. Not if we restructure the sequence, Olivia countered. Instead of separating fundamentals from applications, we integrate them from day 1. The heritage flight training becomes the framework for understanding advanced systems rather than a prerequisite. The approach was unorthodox, but consistent with the center's philosophical foundation. If human expertise and technological advancement were truly complementary rather than sequential, the curriculum should reflect that integration at every stage. It's risky, General Carson observed. Failure would give Harrison exactly the ammunition he needs, while success would demonstrate precisely what makes this center essential, Olivia replied. We're not just training pilots or engineers or systems developers. We're creating aerospace professionals who understand aviation at every level, from basic aerodynamics to artificial intelligence integration. After the meeting, Olivia remained in her office, studying the restructured curriculum plan taking shape on her tablet. The accelerated timeline would be challenging, requiring participants to absorb complex concepts while simultaneously developing fundamental skills. But the approach offered one crucial advantage. It would force them to think holistically about aviation challenges rather than from discipline-specific perspectives. A knock at the door interrupted her concentration. Sarah Martinez entered, her expression a mixture of concern and determination. I heard about the hearing. Harrison's making his move sooner than expected. We knew it was coming, Olivia replied. The center challenges too many vested interests to avoid political opposition. Sarah settled into the chair opposite the desk. There's something you should know. Harrison's chief of staff approached me yesterday, unofficially of course. They're prepared to ensure the center's long-term funding stability if we're willing to make certain practical adjustments to the program. What kind of adjustments? Reducing the heritage flight component to a symbolic element rather than a core requirement. Increasing emphasis on autonomous systems development. And restructuring leadership to include more traditionally credentialed personnel. The message was clear: preserve the center's form while gutting its substance, transforming it from a genuine paradigm shift into another conventional program with a distinctive name. "And if we decline these helpful suggestions?" Olivia asked, though she already knew the answer. "Then Harrison will use the hearings to characterize the center as an expensive vanity project, created to address a single historical injustice rather than a legitimate national security requirement." The political calculation was brutally effective. Frame the center as a sympathy response to Olivia's personal story rather than a necessary correction to dangerous institutional tendencies. Position the integrated approach as a well-intentioned but impractical ideal rather than an essential evolution in aerospace development. "They're underestimating us," Olivia said finally. "And more importantly, they're underestimating what this cohort can accomplish in 6 weeks." The following morning, Olivia addressed the assembled participants with characteristic directness, explaining the accelerated timeline and the political realities that necessitated it. Rather than dampening enthusiasm, the challenge energized the group, many of whom had applied specifically because they believed in the integrated approach the center represented. "We're not just proving a concept," Olivia concluded. "We're demonstrating that the future of aviation lies in the integration of human expertise and technological advancement, not the subordination of one to the other. The skills you develop here will influence aerospace development for decades to come." What followed was the most intensive training program ever implemented in American aviation. Days began before dawn with heritage flight operations in the restored F-5 South participants, developing fundamental flying skills without digital assistance. Afternoons focused on advanced systems integration, with engineers and pilots collaborating to understand how human expertise could enhance technological capabilities rather than be replaced by them. Evenings featured problem-solving scenarios that deliberately crossed disciplinary boundaries, pilots addressing engineering challenges, designers considering operational realities, systems developers experiencing the physical demands of high-performance flight. The approach forced participants to think beyond conventional parameters, developing solutions that incorporated multiple perspectives rather than reflecting single-discipline priorities. 3 weeks into the accelerated program, Captain Takamoto reported an unexpected development. "We're seeing performance patterns we didn't anticipate," she explained during the daily leadership briefing. "The integrated approach is producing synergies beyond our projections." The data supported her observation. Pilots who understood the engineering principles behind flight control systems made more effective decisions when those systems operated at the edge of their performance envelopes. Engineers who experienced the physical and cognitive demands of high-G maneuvers designed interfaces that better supported human capabilities under stress. Systems developers who appreciated the intuitive dimensions of expert flying created algorithms that augmented human judgment rather than attempting to replace it. "It's not just skill transfer," Dr. Wright noted as she reviewed the metrics. "It's the development of a fundamentally different mental model, one that sees technology and human expertise as complementary elements in a unified system rather than separate capabilities in competition." The breakthrough came during week 4, when the cohort faced a previously unsolvable challenge: developing a recovery procedure for a specific flight control failure in the next-generation XF-58 prototype. The problem had resisted conventional approaches for months, with separate teams of engineers, test pilots, and systems developers unable to create a solution that consistently prevented catastrophic outcomes in simulation. The center's integrated team approached it differently, combining insights from heritage flying experience, advanced systems understanding, and human factors research. What emerged wasn't a traditional procedure or a technological fix, but a hybrid approach that leveraged both human adaptability and computational precision to transform a potentially fatal situation into a manageable emergency. When demonstrated, In the XF-5-8 simulator, the solution achieved a 94% success rate, compared to the 23% previously attained through conventional methods. More significantly, it embodied the center's fundamental philosophy by integrating human judgment and technological capability rather than attempting to eliminate one in favor of the other. "This is exactly what we need for the hearing," General Carson observed as he reviewed the results. "Concrete evidence that the integrated approach solves problems conventional methods can't address." The success galvanized the cohort, accelerating their progress as the broken arrow exercise approached. What had initially seemed an impossible timeline now appeared challenging but achievable, with participants developing capabilities that transcended traditional boundaries between disciplines. 4 days before the scheduled exercise, Olivia received an unexpected visitor. Colonel Jason Maxwell, who had continued his career with Air Combat Command after the Centennial incident, arrived at the center without prior notice, requesting a private meeting. "Harrison is planning to attend the exercise personally," he informed her without preamble. "He's bringing a delegation that includes 3 defense contractor CEOs and the Air Force Acquisition Chief. They're expecting failure." The information was concerning but not surprising. "Political theater," Olivia observed. "Create expectations of failure, then use the public demonstration to justify reducing or eliminating the program." Maxwell nodded grimly. His chief of staff has already drafted talking points characterizing the center as a well-intentioned experiment that ultimately proved impractical in addressing real-world requirements. "How would you assess our readiness?" Olivia asked. Valuing his perspective as someone not directly involved in the program, Maxwell considered the question carefully. "Your approach is sound. The integration of heritage flying skills with advanced systems understanding creates capabilities neither could achieve independently. But Harrison isn't interested in operational effectiveness. He's looking for political leverage." Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload. From us,